It's Friday, January 30th. I'm Brian Walsh, and welcome to This Week in Impact, where I talk with ImpactAlpha journalists and editors about some of the most interesting impact investing stories we featured. We'll discuss how some LPs are going beyond the check to help their GP impact managers survive the fundraising drought. Plus, how solar projects in Africa and Latin America pay dividends to U.S. retail investors. And finally, increasing the share of assets managed by women majority-owned investment firms. That's all coming up on This Week in Impact. Hi, David. How are you doing this week?
I'm actually kind of charged up, Brian. I've been out and about on the town in different events here in San Francisco, and there's kind of a switched on feeling, and plus the weather's pretty good out here, so we're happy about that, and sending thoughts to folks in other climates.
Yes, I'm in about 20 inches of snow here and anticipating a possible new snowstorm this weekend. So we'll see. All right. Well, first things first, impact fund managers are facing one of the toughest fundraising environments in years, causing some of the LPs who allocate money to them to rethink how they show up beyond writing checks. ImpactAlpha's Eric Stein wrote a piece this week outlining 10 ways LPs are stepping in to help their GPs. David, what's changed and why now?
Well, I think folks know that it's been like a couple or 3-year drought in fundraising for funds, for private equity and venture funds broadly, but impact funds no less so. And last year's take was about $40 billion in fundraising. It was about half of the 2024 number, which was a little bit more than 80 billion, which was itself half of the 2022 high watermark, which is about $160 billion. So the thesis is that the impact appetite of LPs has not disappeared, but things have certainly gotten stretched out longer, and that puts pressure on these general partners, on these fund managers, who have to keep paying their teams and staying in business. They're small businesses themselves. Their business is being a fund manager, and their revenue stream is fees on the assets they raise. So if they can't raise any assets, they're stretching out their earlier fund longer. Sometimes it runs out. The fees run out over time. And the point is, how do you keep these fund managers with a crisp thesis and with a sort of network and a track record and a team and an ability to execute in business long enough for this fundraising drought to kind of end and them to get back to doing what they really want to do, which is deploy capital to entrepreneurs.
All right, so tell us about some of the examples of ways that LPs are broadening their toolkit beyond the capital commitments.
Yeah, this beyond the check has become the kind of term of art, and it's all the kinds of things that are, what folks really want LPs to do is actually write the check. But if you're not going to write the check, what can you do that helps around the margins? And there's a couple new initiatives that LPs have gotten together on. One is called the GP Runway Fund. It's got Blue Haven, Spring Point Partners, Gary Community Ventures, and it provides working capital, to pay the bills while you're waiting for a fundraise. Sometimes you've got a first close, sometimes not even a first close, but you've got enough traction that they'll lend you the money. That way you can get some staff, you can get your systems up and running. Sometimes those costs are like, $150,000 to $300,000 before you reach a first close. And so the notion is get in business, get professional. You want folks in these folks who are going to give you their money to invest want you to, have all the systems in place to be able to handle it responsibly. So you can't kind of bootstrap or shoestring that all the time. You've really got to invest. Mission-driven finance has something also called the Capital Partners Fund, something similar. World Education Services, Trim Tab, and others are into that, and it helps emerging managers with bridge financing, with working capital, with deal warehousing, with co-investments. Those are all kinds of things what we've identified as kind of tactics and tools that the LPs are deploying.
Right. So it's the LPs helping their GPs kind of build that institutional capacity and get their sea legs ready to go on the journey of investing.
Right. So, for example, warehousing is a way to get a deal done before you've closed the fund. You can't use the funds until you've closed it and dotted all the I's. But you can get a few deals done as kind of sidecar LLCs and things that get later rolled into the fund. And so it's a way to get going, establish a track record, demonstrate that you know how to put a deal together, you know how to diligence a deal and work with the founder and come to terms. And then later when the fund is raised, it gets rolled in. Working capital, we mentioned. There's a few that are kind of interesting, like taking stakes in the general partnership. So the general partnership is the fund manager's own business, and it gets the fees and it later gets some of the profits or so-called carried interest. But you can sell slices of that as well, and that provides you money up front to, like I say, keep your doors open and pay your operations. What it also does, of course, is dilutes your returns on the back end. So it's a little bit of a devil's bargain, but that's one way that LPs who believe in that partner, in that general partner, in that fund manager, can stake them to a little bit of early cash.
Yeah, so it sounds like supporting the credibility of these fund managers is really important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things obviously is just amplifying their profile, right? Getting them in front of the right folks. Whether that's giving a talk, being on a panel, being part of a white paper or some kind of study that makes them look like experts in that field. And LPs have those kinds of connections and can make those kinds of things happen. One interesting initiative is called Policy Enhanced Impact Investing, and Blue Haven and some other LPs stood this up last year, and the notion is that some policy changes and even lobbying might be helpful to the policy environment, but also to the fund performance, and that might be more in the wheelhouse of LPs like Liesl Pritzker of Blue Haven, who's got political people in their networks that can help out, and that's the kind of thing that's beyond the wherewithal of many of the general partners. And so again, it's something that can be taken off their plates and taken on by the LPs to support their managers.
Right. So this shift in LP strategy really does reflect a market stress right now, right? This underscores that the tightening capital markets are kind of presenting a challenge for GPs. So is this a kind of a short-term moment that we're trying to bridge until the fundraising environment improves, or do you think that there might be some broader changes afoot here?
Well, I think the operating assumption is that it's a short-term blip. There's headwinds, as everybody knows. There's a liquidity crunch where the LPs are not getting their money back from their earlier fund commitments. Therefore, they don't have as much capital to recycle. There's a whole bunch of reasons why things have gotten stalled. And yes, the bet is that will lift at some point and things will return. And that's why you can extend things like working capital loans. If it goes on much longer, then the consequences become that much more dire. And if it's permanent, then we're all in trouble.
All right. Well, you can read Eric Stein's full piece on 10 ways LPs are supporting GPs on ImpactAlpha.com. There's also a link in our show notes. Later on, we'll discuss women changing finance and efforts to increase the share of global assets managed by women majority-owned investment firms. But for now, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, how solar projects in Africa and Latin America are paying dividends to U.S. retail investors.
Sign up for Impact Alpha's free weekly newsletter, Impact Alpha Open, a crisp, expert-curated investment briefing that lifts up people, data, tools, trends, and job opportunities to help you stay ahead of the curve. Find the alpha in Impact. Visit impactalpha.com/open to learn more.
Next up, David, democratizing impact investing. Our Lucy Ngigi wrote this week about how U.S. retail investors are financing solar projects in Africa and Latin America, often through crowdfunding platforms that allow small minimum investments from non-accredited investors. So, David, what's driving this fundraising model?
Well, we've talked a lot about the dearth of opportunities for retail investors to have direct impact. People might have so-called, sustainability funds in their 401ks or whatnot, but to be able to make direct impact has been largely reserved for like accredited investors. I always think that's kind of odd that the folks who have the money to be called accredited that thus get access to the better investments as well. But it's supposed to, I suppose, reduce the risk to small investors who might not know better. Yet there are some opportunities. And so we keyed in on Energia. It's based in Connecticut, but it buys actually solar projects in Africa, in Brazil, in now in Colombia as well, and then collects the electricity payments from the customers and dividends that back out to the buyers, who in some cases, as you say, are these retail investors who can put in as little as $100. And Energy in particular thinks it's kind of a trifecta at this moment. It's bringing together energy infrastructure, which is obviously needed and growing, solar and storage primarily, private credit, which folks have heard about is a trend. Some folks say a bubble, but certainly something that's interesting in the marketplace. And then emerging markets, which last year in the public markets really outperformed after many years of kind of lagging. And so there's kind of a buzz on for a change about emerging markets. And you bring all that together, offer it to retail investors, and they're getting, in the case of the Africa funds, just under 10% returns. In the case of the Brazil community solar, just under 14% returns, and then in the U.S. portfolio, which is, I think, has a lot of nonprofit projects in it, 7.2%. So, solid, steady returns, not spectacular, but very low risk. There are customers buying electricity, as folks know, and as people will buy as much electricity as you can produce. So these are operating projects with real customers, with real cash flows. Energy buys them with the money from these retail and other investors and distributes the profits. Very simple.
Now, generally speaking, raising money from retail investors is an expensive proposition. I mean, yes, that's where a lot of assets are, but it's hard to reach those customers and make the case and get them to sign up and provide the customer service and all of that. And so, isn't it easier to finance these infrastructure projects in emerging markets with more institutional capital as opposed to, the cost of finding these retail investors?
Well, I think it's both and. The retail investors provides kind of a steady stream, and you can kind of turn it up and down with marketing and other things. There are higher fees for smaller ticket sizes. So if you get above the $100,000 range for an institutional investor, I think the fees get to be very small, and at the $100 level, they're probably in the 3 or 4% range. So that does affect your returns. The share prices, the dividends actually are the same, but you're going to lose it a little bit on fees. So there is a sort of economies of scale in bigger checks, obviously. But having the retail investors in there, is just a sort of hedge on fundraising, kind of smooths it out, and then, like I say, gives you a kind of constituency of retail investors who know that they own part of this community solar system in Brazil, and that's reducing the electricity rates for those small businesses and households, or in the case of the Columbia project, bringing electricity to indigenous communities that have no grid access at all.
So let's talk numbers here. How many non-accredited retail investors have invested through this crowdfunding platform?
Well, Energia has been around since sort of 2020 with the online platform. I think they did a deal before that. And they have 4,000 of these retail investors on the platform. They have raised, all told, just under 500 million, but that includes a non-retail as well. And they've got 50 to 60 megawatts of operating capacity. It's interesting to me because they're not just developing and lending to projects. They're actually buying projects. They own and operate projects that, like I say, are delivering real electricity to real customers, doing real things. I heard a good line this week. People don't want electrons, from the electricity. They want hot showers and cold beer.
So yeah, again, selling the benefits, not necessarily the product itself. That's the classic sales technique. All right. Well, you can read Lucy's article about how retail investors are collecting dividends in international solar projects on ImpactAlpha.com. There's also a link in our show notes. But for now, we'll take one more quick break. When we come back, increasing the share of assets managed by women majority-owned investment firms. Finally, David, we just added a new show to the Impact Alpha podcast network, Women Changing Finance. In it, host Christina Tora interviews women who are proving that change is possible in the financial industry, whether by investing in underserved communities, developing innovative solutions to address climate challenges, or driving systems-level transformation. Now, David, this comes amidst the sobering fact that less than 1% of all global assets are managed by women majority-owned investment firms. So what's at stake here?
Yeah, I think the number that is going around is 0.7% of the something like 84 trillion, I believe, of assets under management. Another 0.7% is minority owned and led firms. So for a grand total of 1.4%, which has really not budged. I think it might have ticked up slightly a few years ago and then ticked back down, in fact. So it's been stubbornly low. And the thesis, of course, is that women and diverse managers with assets to invest will find different opportunities and different founders, different entrepreneurs, and that the whole flow of capital will change if women and others are in charge. And I went to a gathering in San Francisco this week, the He for She Awards, and this was to celebrate the men who have been champions of women in asset management and kind of promote this allyship notion. And well, it was interesting. Paul Herman of Hip Investor has been in the pages of ImpactAlpha, Scott Saslow of One World Investments, and U.S. Senator Cory Booker coming in by video. All were He for She awardees. And then there was a fourth awardee who was represented only by this kind of silhouette outline on the screen because I think we can use his pronoun there, his financial institution, major financial institution, hadn't yet cleared him through compliance procedures, and so his identity could not be named. And so let's put out a little reward, or at least brownie points for anybody who leaks to us the identity of the mystery man at the He for She Awards this week.
Yeah, people love a blind item in their gossip pages. So we're doing it here at ImpactAlpha. If they had just named it, we probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it. But because they didn't, it's piqued the interest here. So this He for She effort, though, it's not recognizing women who are trying to change how women get into asset management, but the men who champion them.
Yeah, and that's just a nice twist on it, and I think got a few more men to the event. Anton Orlik, he runs CalPERS private equity group, and talked about the pretty substantial increase in the number of women managers that group. I think they put out something like $15 billion a year, and a few years ago it was less than $1 billion going to women-led firms, and now it's something like six plus, so maybe up to a third or 40%. And he said very clearly, that kind of diversity among the managers is a return enhancer, and that word became kind of the hashtag of the evening, return enhancer. So people are saying there's both a business case for diverse managers, and then obviously the sort of justice and equity case as well.
Well, David, both of us are two men here talking about encouraging women to be in asset management. So can we be He for She?
Well, I think they're going to open nominations for next year in March. So we'll see if either you or I get nominated. They did have a kind of all-star cast there. Kristen Hull of Nia Impact Capital, which is a women-owned asset management firm, brought in kind of a star-studded lineup, including Jennifer Siebel, the first partner of California, Governor Gavin Newsom's wife, Malia Cohn, she's the state controller, and Rob Bonta, the attorney general, who was taking a break from suing the Trump administration, I think more than 50 times so far. And then also to close out the night, Kat Taylor, the founder of Beneficial State Bank, and also half of the Tomcat duo with her husband, Tom Steyer, the climate investor who's running for governor of California now. And Kat closed out the evening with new lyrics to a Bob Dylan classic and brought down the house. Here's Kat.
Investments, they come, and investments, they go, without purpose of fixing the mean status quo, until voices left out become voices we know. At the ballot lectern on Wall Street's Beggars Row, take back your impact through your almighty dough. For investors, they are a-changin'.
Well, the times, they are indeed a-changing. We'll see to what degree they do change as time plays out. But for now, that's going to do it for this episode of This Week in Impact. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Brian.
And thank all of you for listening. This Week in Impact is a production of ImpactAlpha and part of the ImpactAlpha podcast network. Smart conversations by and for impact investing professionals. For exclusive stories and insights about the world of impact investing and sustainable finance, join thousands of other agents of impact by subscribing. Just go to impactalpha.com/subscribe for full access. Thanks, as always, to our producer extraordinaire, Isaac Silk. For David Bank, I'm Brian Walsh, Managing Director of the impact advisory firm Human Nature. We'll see you next week for more Impact.